Hello there, welcome to Boomstick Gaming, this is Alex, and you just so happen to have stumbled upon my character and class breakdown for the 2020 remake of Trials of Mana. Picking the right team composition is quite important in this, since you can only start your journey with 3 of the 6 total characters who have their own unique story arcs, class variants, and ways they can somewhat shift how a playthrough can play out. In Trials of Mana, if you're unfamiliar, you can switch between all 3 party members at any time during battle, so you're not just locked into picking one main hero. In this breakdown, I'll be showcasing the general moveset and fundamentals of each character, while also briefly explaining all 6 of their class advancement options. Now, if you happen to be as indecisive as I often am when formulating my RPG parties, hopefully this helps you out somewhat with nailing that perfect team composition straight from the start, so let's break into it. First, Hawkeye, who is a fast dagger-wielding thief who is fairly well-rounded with a very high luck stat, which makes him great at finding the most loot. He starts in the desert fortress of Navarre, where his band of thieving misfits find themselves trying to evade the law.
Maybe you'll think twice about your dirty business practices now that you're the one who's lost all his money, huh? You should thank me, really.
Hawkeye's basic moveset consists of quick multi-hitting strikes, and his combo finishers are particularly strong. Definitely a great starting character for dipping and weaving in and out of combat to dish out some high DPS. His default class strike is Poison Dagger, which hits a few enemies right in front of him, being a decent damage dealer. You will not be locked into being the standard thief class for long, and can swap over to either the Ranger or Ninja class first. The Ranger specializes in status effect magic and also utilizes traps, where the Ninja will focus on debuffing and weakening enemies. Hawkeye's third tier classes are the Nomad, which turns him into more of a support type character, the Rogue, who focuses on traps and ranged combat, the Ninja Master, who excels at dealing large AoE damage, and lastly the Nightblade, who, like the Ninja, focuses on debilitating ailments and shutting down opponents. Hawkeye is a really well-rounded character, and with his focus on DPS and shutdown skills, he makes for a really fun hero to either play as, or provide backup for your team. Next up is Angela, who is a magic-focused spellcaster with incredibly high intellect and spirit. She starts her journey in her hometown of Altina, where she struggles to earn the respect of her queen mother.
Why would my mother... I can't return, but I have no idea what to do now.
Her bare basic attacks with her wand are fairly simple, but do get the job done, at least until she starts amassing her area of effect spells. With the absolute lowest starting strength and stamina, this will be the character that starts the weakest and ends one of the most powerful, just like any good magic class should. Her default class strike is Double Slash, which is one of the weaker starting skills of the bunch, but again, give her a little time and her full potential will be realized as a powerful caster. Her second tier class advancements are the Sorceress, who excels at elemental damage if you like exploiting enemy weaknesses, which also highly boosts her endurance stat, and then you have the Mysticist, who focuses on heavy-hitting intellect-based dark magic spells and having a large pool of MP to play around with. On the third tier, she has the Archmage, who is similar to the Sorceress but also gains access to certain non-elemental spells. The Grand Diviner focuses on subversion with the Doppelganger spell, which makes clones that can attack entirely on their own. The Magus is the area of effect powerhouse of the bunch if you really like nuking your targets. Lastly, there's the Rune Seer, who excels at inflicting status ailments on her enemies. Overall, she is a purely offensive magic damage dealer, and if you want to do the least amount of up-close and personal melee combat, consider maining Angela, or at least have her as damage backup on your team. Kevin is a beast-like brawler who actually transforms during the nighttime and has a very high strength stat and is fairly well balanced overall, outside of his lacking intellect. Kevin starts out in his hometown of Ferolia, where he has somewhat of a manipulative falling out with his father.
We're alike. You and me. A little wolf who acts like a dog. A beast man with human blood in my veins.
Kevin's basic moveset is quite strong for a melee fighter, with nice multi-hitting moves that scoop up enemies pretty nicely. For just using his bare fist for fighting, he is a very strong initial character. His starting class strike is Phenomenal Fist, which will beat down a few enemies directly in front of him. Over in his alternate class upgrades, he has the Monk, who is a balanced fighter who can deal some damage while also providing some healing to himself and allies. The Brawler is a brute strength warrior who forgoes the raw power of his fists and can actually use a broad range of weapons. Over in his final forms, he has the Divine Fist, who excels at pulling off frequent class strikes and can also learn some support magic. The Warrior Monk can absorb MP easily from enemies and can learn some wood saber magic, making it a very well-rounded class. Fatal Fist is a strong melee class which focuses on high DPS area of effect damage. Lastly, the Enlightened, who can life leech health straight from enemies while also being able to perform some magic, which makes it ideal for fighting on the front line. Overall, Kevin is a great melee and support character who is really fun to play as, but also makes for a good teammate since he can really add to your damage while also healing you up if you don't want to. Riesz is a very well-rounded fighter and support magic user who can poke at her enemies from somewhat of a distance with her long-reaching spears. Riesz starts out her journey in Laurent, where she must set out to save her captured brother who accidentally helped the enemy force invade her homeland.
Who are you scoundrels? Step away from my brother!
Riesz's basic moveset is fairly good with fast horizontal and vertical attacks with her spear. Most all of her attacks have good range to them and she makes for a good damage dealer. Her starting class strike is Whirlwind Spear that does a great job at scooping up groups of enemies and inflicting a good deal of damage. Over in her class upgrades, she gets the Valkyrie, who focuses on applying statistical buffs for the entire team. The Rune Maiden functions as the polar opposite of the Valkyrie, which excels at debuffing and weakening enemies. Over in her third tier classes, she has the Vanitas, which is a support class with a very high stamina stat that can actually learn some summoning magic. The Star Lancer is similar to the Valkyrie class, but is even better at providing buffs for the entire team. The Dragon Master can debuff her enemies while also being able to call in a very powerful unique summon to deal damage and inflict poison. The Fenrir Knight, just like the Rune Maiden, excels at debuffing her enemies and also charging headfirst in a battle. Overall, Riesz is a jack of all trades, master of none, but what makes her stand out the most is her powerful summoning abilities. Charlotte is a healer support character with fairly balanced stats, with spirit and intellect being her bias, and her flail weapons allow her to also be efficient in melee. Charlotte starts off her journey in Wendell, where she is having strange premonitions in her dreams, which lead her to run into our other main character, Hawkeye.
Listen up, Tiny. I may be as small as you are, but I happen to be 15 years old, so I'm basically an adult.
For being a support style character, her basic moveset is actually pretty strong thanks to the attacks from her flail. Both of her main combo finishers are pretty reliable ways to hit multiple enemies, and overall she is quicker than she might appear. Her starting class strike is Whack Bam, which is a decent straightforward pummel attack. Over in her class options, first we have the Priestess, who is a support healer with high spirit who can also use some elemental magic. The Enchantress is also a healer style class, but focuses more on melee combat and weakening enemies. Her final classes are the High Cleric, which is the ultimate team healer that can learn the most recovery style magics. The Sage is the pro at eliminating and nullifying status ailments while also being able to use some saber magic. The Necromancer can raise strong undead monsters to help in battle, and she can also curse enemies to lower their stats. Lastly, the Warlock, which excels at locking down and debuffing the enemy, which also gains access to the strong Fetid Breath spell. Charlotte is the optimal character to help keep your team's HP fully topped off, only really lacking in some raw DPS power. Duran is a tanky melee powerhouse thanks to his very high stamina and strength stat, only really lacking in the intellect department. Duran starts out in the city of Valsana, where he is striving to win over the respect of the Hero King by showcasing his combat prowess in one-on-one duels.
He must pay for this. I do not plan to return home until he has answered for these crimes. I cannot.
His basic moveset is very strong right from the get-go, thanks to not only its speed, but also the scooping reach of his blade. Duran definitely has some of the most well-rounded combat potential, at least early on. His starting class strike is Crosscut, which will send him leaping forward to slice up the area right in front of him. Duran's class options start out with the Knight, who can use shields and some healing magic to help defend his allies. The Gladiator forgoes the option to use a shield and instead goes for all-out attack while also being able to use some elemental magic. Over in his last tier, he has the Liege, who is a better version of the Knight who excels at both attack and defense. The Paladin has a very high stamina stat, which makes him great for tanking and can also use some support magics to help the party. The Duelist is another all-out attack class who gains access to some Darksaber magic. The Eldefree is a strong fighter who excels at exploiting enemy weaknesses thanks to use of his elemental magics. Overall, Duran is a good all-around fighter and tank style character who is great to play as but can also help beef out your team. That's it, that's all 6 of the characters in Trials of Mana along with all 6 of their subclasses. I'm hoping this helps you pin down the right synergies you want to aim for with your team composition, and also let me know down in the comments what character and class you think you're going to like the best. Now, if you happen to enjoy my style of content that focuses mainly on gameplay mechanics and systems, consider subscribing to Boomstick Gaming for more, ringing that little bell icon if you already are to stay up to date on my future uploads, and you can also find me over on Twitter at BoomstickAlex. Lastly, a big shout out to the top supporting YouTube members and patrons you're seeing on screen who really help to keep this individually owned and operated channel going. As always, this has been Alex from Boomstick Gaming, and thanks for watching.